Hi everyone, I'm Karine Princet. I'm currently a postdoctoral researcher associated to the CESCO at the National Museum of Natural History in Paris. And today I'm very pleased to present a work I did a couple of years ago and present how citizen science can help to monitor avian botulism outbreaks in the Great Lakes area and how environmental conditions may influence those outbreaks. So bird mortality caused by ingestion of the type E botulism toxin has been periodically reported on the Great Lakes since the 60s. But the resurgence of avian botulism outbreaks since the late 90s has brought renewed attention to this wildlife health issue. Avian botulism die-offs are induced by a toxin produced by the bacterium Clostridium botulinum. This bacterium produces a neurotoxin that causes a lot of health issues for birds that usually end by the death of the animal after a loss of motor control, eyelid paralysis, drowning, respiratory distress. The pathways to these massive die-off are not totally well known, but one main theory suggests that the toxin makes its way into birds as the following. Zebra and quagga mussels, that are invasive species that have colonized the Great Lakes very fast these last decades, filter lake water, making it clearer and allowing more sunlight through, which spurs algae blooms, Cladophora species, that grow into blanket-like mats that slough off onto the beach. Here you have an example of a picture of those algae blooms taken through satellite images. As the mats decompose, they deplete oxygen from areas on or near the shore. Anaerobic conditions combined with warmer temperatures and nutrients released from decaying organisms can then drive a native bacterium to release the type E botulism toxin into the water. Then, the toxin makes its way through the food chain. That botulism toxin is ingested by invertebrates, tiny worms, and freshwater shrimp, and by mussels, as you can see at the bottom of the graphic. Those are then eaten by fish, including the invasive round goby, which are further eaten by diving birds like the common loons, the black and white birds in the middle of the picture of birds. Occurring during the summer and autumn months, the prevalence of this die-off varies across years and is often associated with years of warmer lake temperature and lower water levels. Factors that are themselves often linked to higher growth rates of algae mats, which tend to increase the production of botulism toxin. However, we have little information on how variability in environmental conditions, such as Cladophora prevalence or water temperature, influences the spatial and temporal characteristics of mortality events when they do occur. In 2010, the USGS, National Wildlife Health Center, implemented a citizen science program which aimed at monitoring avian botulism mortality events along the shoreline of northern Lake Michigan. Volunteers walk parts of the Lake Michigan shoreline to monitor bird health and beach conditions. But bird carcasses that are found are sent to the lab for testing of the presence of the botulism toxin. Using data from this program, we explore the spatiotemporal characteristics associated with widespread mortality events. More especially, we look for patterns of spatial synchrony, which refers to coincident changes in other time-varying characteristics of geographically disjunct population. Synchrony may arise from three primary mechanisms: dispersal among population, trophic interactions with population of other species that are themselves spatially synchronous or mobile, or from the Moran effect. The Moran effect states that synchronized time fluctuation of separate populations are caused by correlated fluctuation in environmental conditions, causing strong local synchrony that declines with spatial distance. As such, Another question we were interested in was were there environmental conditions associated with mortality events? So within the handball program, participants choose quarter mile or longer section, defined as transect, of shorelines to monitor every 7 to 10 days from June through November. So the data set we ended with, resulting in 103 transects surveyed through the period, more than 4,000 unique observations, and 40 species recording total during the 4-year period. We focused our analysis on the 7 most common species, which represent 90% of the total carcasses detected within the data set. We group these 7 species according to their migratory status, whether they were migrant or resident species. And we also assign these species to foraging guilds based on their diet during the non-breeding season. For the environmental data, we acquired image data from the NASA Earth observation at 1 kilometer resolution. We used spatially explicit 8-day surface water temperature and chlorophyll A concentration data from MODIS program. We extracted both environmental data within radius buffer of around 15 kilometers of each of the transect centroids. And we further run different statistical analysis to explore those data and answer the research question I presented right before. First, the carcass detections were recorded as daily unadjusted counts and were available from each transect. As a preliminary step, we explored how variation in sampling effort might influence carcass detection. We found evidence of multicollinearity among the effort variables and the final set of uncorrelated variables consisting of the time of effort, the number of observers in group, and the transect length in kilometers. We found that the mean abundance of carcass detections increased significantly with the time of effort and transect length. As such, we developed an index of mean abundance of carcasses detected divided by effort, thereafter referred as carcasses per unit of effort, CPUE. A second question we were interested in was to analyze the seasonal patterns of mortality across species and guilds and in relation to variability in environmental conditions. We found patterns of high mortality in autumn in both 2010 and 2012, the years with the highest peaks in mortality event, although peaks in carcass detection varied within and between years. So the results presented here correspond to all the 7 species together. In terms of environmental conditions, changes in water temperature, so the plain line here in the figure at the bottom, were similar across years, with lake temperature showing expected increase during spring and early summer, and then decreasing in autumn. However, seasonal fluctuation in water temperature and algae prevalence, so presented here as a dashed line, varied from one year to the other. Then we wanted to calculate the scale of spatial synchrony in patterns of CPUE, so the carcasses per unit of effort, and the variation in water temperature and concentration of chlorophyll. The classic method to measure synchrony is the correlation between time series of abundance. And one of the common approaches is to model this relationship using correlogram that show how correlated are pairs of spatial observation when you increase the distance, the lag between them. Correlograms directly estimate the spatial covariance function and measure the strength and spatial scale of local autocorrelation, which means the strength and local scale of synchrony. We found little evidence for species-specific patterns. We found, however, evidence of spatial synchrony when summarized across all the 7 species, with a spatial extent about 40 kilometers, as you can see on both figures, presenting the result of spatial synchrony in both 2010 and 2012. We did not find any consistent pattern of spatial synchrony in carcasses detected across migratory or foraging guilds, except for peacekeepers in 2012, as you can see in this figure, where we found that the spatial extent of the local synchrony was going up to 28 kilometers. So a little bit less than the 7 species altogether. We found a significant spatial autocorrelation in the fluctuation in water temperature and chlorophyll concentration at scales of 40, 60 kilometers respectively. Water temperatures and chlorophyll had significant and symmetrical decays in synchrony with geographic distances that corresponded to the synchrony of carcasses detection, although water temperatures exhibited overall low values of autocorrelation, as you can see in the figures presented here, with temperature being the first line and concentration of chlorophyll, the proxy for algae concentration, being represented in the second line of the figures. And as a last part of analysis, we try to explore whether within-year geographical fluctuations in carcasses detection were correlated with variability in both water temperature and chlorophyll concentration. For this purpose, we used multiple regression on distance matrices. So we constructed similarity matrices that we compared and analyzed. And we defined we assessed significance using permutations. We constructed, we built, 3 models. One was space-only model, which correspond to testing spatial distance influence only. An environmental only model with the effect only of water temperature and concentration of chlorophyll, and a combined model in which we tested the influence of both spatial distance and both variables of environmental conditions. We measure the influence of each set of predictors by following the variance partitioning approach. Using the MERM analysis, we found strong evidence of spatial autocorrelation, as you can see on the first line here on the brown area of the space-only model. So strong evidence of spatial autocorrelation, both year 2010 and 2012. And we also found that high carcasses detection was strongly associated positively with chlorophyll concentration both years. Looking at the percentage of variance explained, we found that the environment model explained more than twice as much variation in the synchrony in avian mortality events as the space-only model in 2010, and more than 10 times as much in 2012, as you can see on the figure represented here on the slides. The combined model, so space plus environment, explain only slightly more variance than the environment model in both years. These findings suggest that the additional information of environmental variability was critical for explaining variance in spatiotemporal patterns of carcass detections. So, as a conclusion, we found mortality events being highly synchronized over space and time. And as a recommendation for the practitioners and the people coordinating the citizen science program, the HUMBLE project, we suggested that future monitoring programs should strive for an extensive geographic extent, as avian botulism mortality and environmental variables have spatial extent of about 40 to 80 kilometers. We also found that the extent of this spatial synchrony in avian mortality matched that of variability in lake surface water temperatures and the prevalence of green macroalgae through the concentration of chlorophyll here. This is suggestive of a Moran effect, meaning that the fluctuation of environmental conditions synchronize or have influence, on these have an influence on these botulism outbreaks. And in the future, rising lake temperatures and a higher propensity of algae masses increases in the magnitude and synchronization of avian mortality due to the botulism, the citizen-based monitoring efforts are critical. Citizen science monitoring efforts are also an essential tool for many aspects of ecological monitoring because they facilitate the partnership of concerned citizens and professional ecologists. And this project was a perfect example of this. And very interesting for me, at least, to explore and to be involved in such a project. And with that, I would like to thank my co-authors and my collaborator, Benjamin Zuckerberg, Jennifer Schippo, and Leanne White for this very interesting work, and all the project partners. And I'd like to thank all the citizen scientists who provided the data I was able to work with. And so if you want to know more about this work, because I only presented part of the result of this study, those results were published in Journal of Applied Ecology a couple of years ago. So do not hesitate to have a look at it and to contact me through my email or Twitter account or whatever you can find to drop me a message with some questions or some point to discuss. And thank you for your attention.